Good morning and welcome. We hope everyone is healthy, safe. The overwhelming interest in this panel shows us that the industry is female, and the Blank family of businesses are committed to doing more. We are overjoyed at the lineup of powerhouse women we have with us today, and to provide the next generation of female leaders the opportunity to gain knowledge, insights, and career advice from leading women behind some of the biggest brands in the sports industry. The Atlanta Falcons, the Atlanta United, PGA TOUR Superstores, the Home Depot Backyard, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and Mercedes-Benz USA. To quote a famous Beyonce lyric, who runs the world? Girls. We want this space to feel safe, open, fun, free, and conversational. So I'm going to kick us off with some quick introductions, and let's see who these ladies are rooting for in the men's and women's NCAA basketball tournaments happening now. So first off, we have Katie Griggs. Katie serves as the Chief Business Officer for the Atlanta United, where she is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations for Atlanta United and Atlanta United 2, including ticket sales and service, marketing, communications and community relations, digital finance, sponsorship and sales, and facility operations. Katie, what don't you do? When you find time to tune into sports outside of soccer, who are you rooting for the men's and women's NCAA basketball tournaments?
No, I'm so excited to be here. So for the women's tournament, I'm rooting for UConn this year. So my in-laws have been season ticket holders for the last 20 plus years, so my allegiances are firmly swung in that direction. Men's tournament, I'm not going to lie, I haven't been able to watch as much as I would normally. So we're playing our first match on Tuesday, so that's had a little more of my attention, but all UConn on the women's side.
Okay, awesome. Morgan, we're going to go to you. Morgan Shaw Parker serves as the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for AMB Sports Entertainment, overseeing all brand marketing and media group, including brand communications, broadcast, digital and social media, and creative design functions for Atlanta Falcons and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Morgan, as the Queen of Marketing, who are you rooting for in the men's and women's NCAA basketball tourneys?
Well, right now I am cheering for Gonzaga on the men's side, but I have to say it was hard not to cheer for Arkansas with the energy that Eric Musselman and his family and his team was bringing to the tournament. So I loved seeing that. On the women's side, I am a perpetual advocate of women's basketball at the University of Oregon, but I have to say Stanford and Russell Wilson's little sister, and seeing that come to life, that team, it's really something special to watch.
Absolutely, me too. So Jill, next up we have Jill Spiegel, and Jill is the Chief Merchandising Officer for the PGA TOUR Superstores, where she is responsible for all merchandising and planning functions across product categories, including golf clubs, accessories, apparel, footwear, and tennis. Jill, when you are not busy with 45 stores across 17 states, who are you rooting for in the men's and women's NCAA basketball tournament?
Well, in women's, I have to go SEC, so University of South Carolina. And in men's, UCLA, they beat my beloved Spartans. And then I had to defer to Michigan, but they were taken out last night. So I'm going to go for the team that defeated my home state team.
Awesome. Next up, we have LaTonda Henderson. Henderson serves as the Director of Community Activation at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, with the charge of running the Home Depot Backyard. The Backyard is a beautiful 11-acre multi-use green space that provides a broad spectrum of programming for all audiences, as well as parking and tailgating opportunities for the Atlanta Falcons and the Atlanta United. LaTonda, who are you rooting for the men's and women's NCAA basketball tourneys?
So Jacoria, in full transparency, I've been watching baseball with an 8th grader more than I've been watching the Final Four. But I will say I've watched 2 minutes of the men's, and the UCLA game between UCLA and Alabama was incredible. So I'm going to have to say that I'm rooting for UCLA. And then for women, I'm going for Stanford.
Okay, awesome.
I'm going with Morgan.
Stanford in the house. So next up, we have Tamika Risch. Tamika serves as the Vice President of Game Day and Event Experience, where she oversees game day and event experiences for all Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and third-party events. Tamika has been with the NFL for 17 seasons and with the Falcons for 15 of those seasons. Tamika, the woman with the plan, who are you rooting for the men's and women's NCAA basketball tourneys right now?
Jacoya, thanks. I am a Tar Heel at heart when it comes to basketball. I went to the University of North Carolina and the University of Georgia, and when it comes to basketball, I only care about the Tar Heels. And so when I look at the lineup, there's a lot of people that I don't want to get ahead of UNC in statistics. So Stanford, we compete with them in the Sears Cup. And so if Stanford wins, that hurts us overall in our athletic department. UConn, we're always competitive with them year over year. So I'm going to go, I can't say we are the real Carolina, so that rules out South Carolina as it relates to women. So in women's, I'm going to go by default with Arizona. And then the men's, I worked in Houston for the Texans. That's where I started my NFL career. So I'm really proud of UH that they're in the tournament still at this point. So I'm going to choose Arizona and Houston.
Okay. So next up, we have Monique Harrison. Monique is the head of brand experience marketing at Mercedes-Benz USA, where she has helped grow Mercedes' sales through partnerships such as Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the US Open, and the Masters. Monique, who are you rooting for in the men's and women's NCAA basketball tourneys?
So I'm probably with Jill on the ladies front. I'm going to go South Carolina. It's real hard to go against Coach Daly, so I am definitely going South Carolina on the ladies front. And for men, I mean, who doesn't love a good story? I've got to go with Gonzaga. I mean, how can you not go with the undefeated story?
Awesome. Okay, it looks like we have some competition going here, but I'm rooting for Stanford and UCLA. But let's hop right into the reason we're gathered here today. Today's panel will touch on 4 topics: the importance of women in sports, career paths and advice, self-care and work-life balance, and diversity, equity, inclusion in sports. And so we're going to kick off first with the importance of women in sports. And for our first question, I'm going to go to Morgan and Jill. Morgan, you're going to go first. What does a woman's role in sport look like, right? And why is it essential that women are leaders in the industry? And then Jill, if you have anything to add, you'll follow Morgan.
I actually really appreciate this question. And I appreciate all of the questions that came in from the listeners. But this one in particular is an easy one to answer. Women should be anywhere that men are. Women should be on the field, in the boardroom, in the stands, on the sidelines, playing, coaching, basically anywhere where decisions are being made. But I will say that investing in women isn't a charity. It isn't an initiative. It's a smart, strategic business decision. And as a team, what's interesting, and especially a football team in a men's sport, in professional NFL football, it's interesting because sometimes we look at that as a very male-dominated entity, but there's so many areas where women can and should be involved, from a community side as well. So we also talk a lot about the fact that in Atlanta, we need to represent the community that we seek to serve. And in Atlanta, it's 53% female. I think it's 53.7% female. So, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we represent our fan base and represent this city. That said, some of these underrepresented industries like sport, there needs to be a path for women. And there hasn't been traditionally in years past or decades past, and not the too distant past. There hasn't been a path for women to ask questions, to learn, to feel comfortable. So I think it's incumbent upon us to help make that happen.
Awesome. And so Jill, we're going to go to you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with Morgan more. And a stat that somebody shared with me is, sports and women naturally go hand in hand. 65% of the most powerful women have one thing in common, and that's sports. I grew up playing sports. I was a runner and a swimmer. I swam at Michigan State. So sports has always been at the center of my life. And it's really fun to watch because more and more as time goes on, women's sports are getting a lot more attention. So for example, this week, it's very relevant. The Augusta Women's National Amateur Golf Tournament is being played at Augusta National. This is the second time it's been played. The first tournament was 2 years ago, and there's actually 3 UGA Bulldogs teaming up, which is really exciting for our city. In Augusta National, there's a lot of history there and a lot of controversy, and it's always been home to the Masters, a PGA Tour event played by men. So to have women playing there is a really cool thing. So if you're not a golfer, regardless, tune in this weekend because it's really exciting to see these young girls getting the attention and getting to play at a venue like that. And, you know, when it comes to your career, women are as equally deserving as men to hold positions in the sports industry and should not shy away from these opportunities. You know, my firsthand experience in sports as a child really shaped who I am as a person, and it's really made a tremendous impact on my career. You know, athletics has taught me a lot, you know, discipline, dedication, how to balance many different aspects of my life at the same, and most importantly, teamwork. You know, and it's critical that women strive for leadership roles, not only because they have so much value to add, but really setting an example for the next generation, which Morgan also alluded to. And, you know, now that I'm further along in my career, I've been, you know, working, I'm in my 4th decade of my career. Doesn't feel like it, but, you know, one of my top priorities is developing young professional women and really grooming them for future leadership positions and making sure that, you know, there's equality.
Absolutely. That's very powerful. You know, I played basketball, softball, did shot put and discus in school. And just like you, Jill, it absolutely instilled a lot of the core values that I have with me to this day, especially with influential coaches that I had along the way. And quite frankly, just teammates and learning about folks from different walks of life. So much power, I believe, truly in sport. And I think this is a great segue into the next question, because sometimes you have to look back in order to go forward. So to Monique and Morgan, I'll ask, and Monique, you'll go first this way. Please share with us a little bit about a female business leader that you look up to or has shaped your journey, and why.
Well, when I'm not totally enamored with Sarah Blakely in the Spanx story, because I can't get enough of her. I mean, if there's a way to follow her, I do. It's everything from her witty nature to how she started the business. I'm absolutely all over. So I mean, her I follow just for pure inspiration every day. But I would say, as you know, someone who helped me throughout, it actually would be a former boss who, ironically enough, I'm sitting at Mercedes and she's now the CMO of Ford. So we're in a completely different seat than we were in when our career started. And I certainly took a lot more out of her playbook. But she taught me quite a bit back then. I think back to a younger me, and I looked at, can a woman have it all? Can I go down the path of being tied to sports, but on the corporate side of things? Am I going to be able to survive in male industry? There's so many questions. And I think she helped me understand that, one, there was a balance that you could have and you could achieve it all, but you had to understand that you couldn't have it all at the same time. You had to understand what was important and how to prioritize that. That I certainly appreciate. And the second piece that I think she helped me understand early on was I shouldn't be afraid to share a bit of myself. So it doesn't matter where we are. We could literally be in the restroom washing our hands, and I probably have a conversation to strike up. And especially if I don't know you, sharing a little bit of yourself allows you to be vulnerable in some instances, but certainly allows you to create relationships with people that it helps when you're in the boardroom and you're making decisions. To have that relationship certainly helps. So I definitely learned that from her early on in my career. I think I modeled a lot of that behind her, and it helped me to develop a little bit of what I have today of what I would consider a little bit more of an unbossed style. I think I kind of narrated that myself. I didn't necessarily take that from her, but she helped create that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Morgan, did you have anything to add about a female leader business leader that you look up to, that shapes your journey?
Sure. You know, I thought about this a lot. There's a lot of amazing women that have impacted my life. And I too have had some amazing female bosses over my career. And it is, you know, I know we'll talk about work-life balance in a little bit, but someone that I kept coming back to is Pat Summitt, God rest her soul. She was always, and is still, even after she's passed, you know, she was the head coach of, Tennessee basketball for the women. And I respected her mindset because so much of the way she coached and the way she taught and the way she represented herself could be translated to what I did every day and what I do every day. And so a lot of times, you know, I'll come back and I'll reference things that I took from watching her. And I had the great fortune of working with her a bit when I worked for Nike. And she's definitely someone in the way, and Monique mentioned it, you know, her vulnerability with her team, her vulnerability but yet confidence and firmness when it mattered was really important. And it was important for me as a young person growing up, seeing that coming from someone who I thought was so powerful, who I thought had it all together all the time, but yet she was real and she was human. And I think that allowed her team to connect with her on a different level, and her team to perform at the highest level as well, because of the style that she brought and because of her personality, not just the skill set in coaching. So I would say she's a business leader as well, even though she really deployed that on the court.
Absolutely. Pat Summit, and of course, was as a female basketball athlete at the time in high school, middle school, elementary school, growing up, that was always a team that the Lady Vols were always a team that I would watch on TV, and that I was a big fan of Candace Parker and Shannon Bobbitt and the ladies that played on her team. And it's amazing how much an impact somebody can have on you, even from afar, that you've never met. So Morgan, I absolutely resonate with you, and it's a blessing to hear that you had the opportunity to work with the legend and in your role at Nike. And to Monique's point of you can have it all, but not necessarily at the same time. I think that's something that a lot of young women continuously hear all the time. I know I've heard it at least 3 times in my career from very powerful leaders that I look up to. And so I just to say thank you. And it's different than when you hear about it and you actually see it in action. So just thank you for that response. And so we're going to go next to Jill and Morgan. And Jill, you're going to go first. What has been really your strategy as a female in a leadership role to navigate a male-dominated industry? And what have you really learned to do more of? And what have you learned to do less of?
Well, good question, Jacoria. And I actually get asked this question a lot, as I'm sure all my fellow panelists do. And honestly, I really haven't approached my career any differently, being in a male-dominated industry. I have 30 plus years of experience prior to this role in department stores. I was with Federated Department Stores, which is now Macy's. And I would say 70-80% of that workforce was female. So when I joined the PGA TOUR Superstore 10 years ago, it's very male dominant, as the golf industry is, and I was the only woman on the leadership team until last year. So now I have a fellow woman on the leadership team whose name is also Jill. I initially up front, I just made the decision, I'm not going to let this intimidate me in any way. I approached the job the same way I would have in the past, and really never thought of myself any differently than my peers. If anything, I actually felt like it was an advantage. I brought a different perspective to the business, and I think it's always really important to have diversity of thought. And I personally, I feel really lucky. I was never treated any differently than any of my coworkers by my boss or my peers. And, there's a funny story. We had an offsite one time, and, I said, hey, you guys just treat me like your sister. And they took that to heart, and that's the way they treat me. Not always a good thing, but it kind of put us all at ease. And, I think it's really important, no matter what, is to show up with confidence. Even if you're feeling overwhelmed or insecure because you're different than the majority of the group. I haven't changed my style based on the fact that I work with mostly men at the leadership level, but it's important to stay true to yourself, stay confident, and then remember, you have something significant to offer and you were hired for a reason. So just always keep that in the back of your mind.
That's powerful. Thank you for that, Jill. Absolutely. And there is so much power and diversity of thought and walking in confidence, even when you feel like you're in a room with folks that are different from you. So absolutely. Morgan, do you have anything to add there?
Sure. I've had a 25 plus year career that has spanned multiple sports, but really in the men's space. I grew up as the oldest of 5 daughters. And so in some ways, I think I had a natural aspiration and a confidence, but I had to develop resilience over that time. I can share stories all day long of within the football world, when there wasn't necessarily a place for women, how hard it was. And at the end of the day, we can all bond over those types of stories on what we've all been through. But I actually look at those as, opportunities now, where I look back and I say, man, I overcame that. I didn't look at it as, as necessarily something negative all the time. It's something that I had to develop my confidence and build my resilience and then apply that to the next situation. And I think if you come at it from a strong foundation, And like Jill mentioned, come at it from a confident space and understand that it's okay to ask questions. You have every right to be there. You've earned that space based on your skill set and based on the perspective that you bring. And you shouldn't be afraid to use your voice. So, you asked what would we do more of, or what would I do more of? What would I do less of? I think more admitting to myself and others in the room as well, whether that's leaders or whatnot. If I don't know something in a space, then it's okay to ask questions. You don't have to be perfect. And I think as women, sometimes we put that burden on ourselves that we have to know everything. We have to be the smartest person in the room. And that's not always the case, and it shouldn't be.
Oh, wow. That's so powerful. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that, Morgan. That's a perfect segue into our next segment in discussing, career path and advice. And this first question is going to be for Tamika and Katie. And Tamika, this is going to go to you first. What are the most successful graduates doing to distinguish themselves right now from other candidates when entering the sports industry?
I think as I look at graduates coming out of college, the ones that stand out to me are the ones that have made effort to get experience while they're in school. University campus is one of the greatest places to get experience. If you want to learn marketing, one of the teams on campus, you don't have to be with men's basketball or football to learn. The baseball team, the softball team, the golf team, gymnastics, they are all looking for resources. And the great thing, it may not be great from an economic standpoint, but the great thing about college is they can take volunteers, and just a weekend working an event can teach you so much of understanding just what is going on in the space. So when you come into those interviews, you can actually talk about you're not talking about classroom, you're talking about real life experience that you've had. And I think as I'm looking at the resumes, that also shows someone that's not just a fan. It's someone that has taken the time, made the effort, made the sacrifices. And, I have roughly, I think it's 80 something people that intern for me that are now working in sports across the country. And those people, they're successful, not because I'm so amazing at what I've taught them, but because I picked people that had a commitment prior to they were coming here. They were serious about the business. And then it's easy to coach those people. And the last thing I would say is we can teach anything tactical, but we cannot teach attitude and we cannot teach work ethic. Those are self-motivated. And so if you show up with a great attitude about taking on whatever's in front of you, we laugh about the NFL, about how not glamorous it is. We'll be hauling boxes, pushing carts, booking U-Hauls. All of those things are a regular week in the NFL, but you've got to have a good attitude, do what is asked of you is the minimum, and have that work ethic to be able to handle the event world, because the event world's not a 9-to-5 business.
Wow, that is extremely powerful, and I love that. And that's actually the first time I've heard that, but I love that, Tamika, that you can teach anything tactical, but you can't teach work ethic or attitude. That's powerful, and I know that a lot of young ladies that are watching today and who will hear this will take that to heart. And so, Katie, do you have anything to add to that point?
Sure. Yeah, no, I completely echo everything that Tamika said. I think the only things I would add on to that are the ability to communicate effectively, both in terms of written word and just spoken word, is really, really important, because ultimately you can't make change, you can't make an impact if people aren't buying into what you're saying. And so I think that's something that often does get underrated, is the ability to effectively communicate. So that is something that when I look at people who have really stood out to me over their careers, that is something that I think is, even if not an innate strength, a learned strength, to Tamika's point about teaching tactics, but it's something that's absolutely critical. And as you're looking at attitude and mentality, Tamika's right. Like this is an industry that is not necessarily glamorous. You come in, even at my level, even at Tamika's level, we spend a lot of our time doing things that are just need to get done. And so it's that willingness to learn, the willingness to understand that this is a really diverse industry. And when you get your foot in the door, you may or may not get your foot in the door in the place you ultimately want to be, and that's okay. It's a great opportunity to learn from those around you, understand what is it that have helped those people around you be successful, and help position yourself for that next step, whether it's in a vertical line because you happen to be perfectly aligned for what you're trying to do, or if it's something where you're coming in, you're learning the industry, you're learning the space, and you take advantage of that to pivot to something else.
Awesome. The main thing I hear you saying, Katie, is being teachable and being flexible. And that goes back to the work ethic, and that goes back to your attitude. And so I think the next question that I have actually will go back to you again, Katie, and it'll go as well, but Katie, you'll go first. What would you suggest are the best ways to go about networking in 2021? This past year has been, of course, a little different. And so has COVID-19, do you think, changed how we should do that networking?
It's interesting. From my experience, I'd actually say it hasn't changed a whole lot. So I had a somewhat unique experience in that I went to school in rural New Hampshire. There are not a lot of people you can meet with face-to-face in rural New Hampshire, especially not in the sports industry. So when I was looking to network, when I was looking to break into the industry, I had, without exaggeration, no fewer than 100 different phone calls with men and women throughout the industry of sports, ranging from EAs at the NBA to the commissioner of the SEC conference. And it truly was all about just understanding who they are. It really goes back to that sort of interest in learning and interest to figure out where can you fit in, what is your story going to be. So when I think about networking, it really is, informational interviews are just that. They're opportunities for you to gather information, but it is at the end of the day an interview. You never know where that next opportunity may lie, and you never know if it's something that, even if there's nothing now, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, that could be the person that has the ability to make or break your career. So it's taking advantage of those times, being respectful of people's time when you're talking to them, coming in with actual questions and an objective. But really, for me, I think if you can get face-to-face, that's fantastic, but a lot of people are really busy. And so never underestimate the value of a well-crafted email or a good informational interview phone call.
LaTanya, do you have anything to add there?
I actually do, because networking has changed for me a little bit in COVID. And what's been really clear is that you have to be deliberate. And where you had more opportunities for social gatherings and outings, and you had opportunities to bump into people, you don't quite have that now. So you really have to have a strategy on, and I don't call it networking, relationships that you want to build, and be bold. I've started conversations with folks during COVID that I know them, but we didn't have a recurring conversation. We didn't have something scheduled on the calendar. And those conversations have been so rich and have been so helpful to me. Right now, people aren't traveling as much, if at all. So they're more willing to take that time. They're more available. Not that they're not busy, but they're more available and willing to do a video conference with you. So for me, that's been really critical. Reach out and ask, and look for learning opportunities, not networking. I've been so fascinated by what other people do, what other people are interested in, and their career progression. So for me, it's been critical because I'm on a path that's a little bit different. I didn't go through sports. I didn't grow up working with teams or the NFL. And my background is in consulting. So coming into the sports industry is a really new industry for me, and working in the community space in that industry. So I open myself up every day to learn from somebody new. So I would encourage everybody, go out there. Somebody who might not have been available before, reach out to them now, before everything completely opens back up, and it's going to be really hard to get people's time and attention.
Amazing perspectives from you both. And this next question, I think we'll build on that, and it'll go to you again, the first LaTanya, and then to Tamika. And so I think this builds on what you were just talking about. So what advice would you give the next generation of women waiting to hold leadership roles?
What I would say first and foremost, I know there's a lot of focus on where you want to go and the seat that you want to fill and the title that you want to have. But I would say focus more attention on who you want to be and the life that you want to live. Because sometimes you'll find that that seat you're looking to fill or that title you're looking to have might be completely opposite or in conflict with the life you want to live and how you want to show up in the world. And we really only get one chance at this. There was a really powerful sermon that I heard when I was about 16, and it stuck with me to today. And it was about being very careful not to get to the top of the ladder only to realize that your ladder was on the wrong building. And as a 16-year-old, that struck me in a way that has never left me. Success for success' sake is great if that's what you're interested in. But when you get to the end of your life, you want to have lived a life of purpose, of meaning, and you want to be true to yourself. So when you sit still and you think about who you are, you know who you are. Do you and lean into the best version of that. We have some phenomenal folks on this call right now. I can't do Tamika's job. I can't do Katie's job. I can't do Jill's job. But what I can do is be the absolute best version of LaTonda. And if I do that, there's nobody who can compete with me in that lane. So I would encourage the next generation, listen to yourself, know who you are, and focus as much attention on, if you don't see a lane that fits for you, create your own and be unapologetic about it.
That is so powerful. Leading with purpose and creating the space and the life that you want to live. I mean, you said the sermon that you heard when you were 16, LaTonda, but I think you gave a whole sermon just now, and we all felt it. So, if ministry was not in your deck of cards before, maybe you should consider it possibly. And so, I think I want to take the next question that we have. That's honestly just a really, really great segue into our next segment before we get some feedback from Tamika. Tamika, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, you would come to me after the sermon. So LaTonda, amazing words that are really powerful. I would just say, to echo what LaTonda had said, I've looked at my life never about what job I want, but I want to put tools in my tool belt. So am I getting an experience that is making me more competitive for a role tomorrow? If I'm doing that, I'm growing. And if I'm growing, I'm becoming more competitive for opportunities in the future. And to kind of go back to the first question of networking, I'm not a big fan of that word. That word's intimidating. Women especially, I think, get caught up on it. Have conversations, talk to people. I think what people don't realize or think about often is you are always interviewing. We are all interviewing right now. When there are people listening to you, you're communicating with them inside and outside the job. You are always interviewing. I got a call. If we'd had this call a year ago, I was sitting in a position that's very different than the one I'm in today. I never applied for the job I'm in today. I got a call. We would like for you to do X, Y, and Z because of the experience you've had and what we've seen you do before. So I think women oftentimes get too caught up on a destination. And sometimes when you're caught on a destination, you miss something amazing in the process. And I think, I like to live my life a little less, I'm probably a little less goal-oriented, although people who know me know that I like to achieve and like to, but I believe life's a little bit more like, let's make a deal. And you're presented with doors and you try to make the best decision of which door to open, but you can't predict what's on the other side of the door. And you learn and you go through life and you build skills and you try to make your best decisions as possible. But I think as women, a lot of times we don't take risk and we're afraid to open that door because we might get the elephant, right? And so through my journey, I've realized that sometimes the door that opens, even if it feels like, oh my gosh, I got an elephant, like I can start a zoo. Like, what am I going to do with this opportunity and what can I learn from it? And men are way more willing to take risk and step out on something. Women want to be perfect before they apply. Men are like, I'm going to apply, and if they tell me, I'll BS my way through it. And so I think just leaning into that more, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and just have conversations and realize you don't know what a conversation can turn to. You don't know who's watching, but you're always interviewing.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing to pull from both of you all is that life is all about relationships, and relationships matter to more than anything else, really. And if you master where you are and get everything and build your tool belt, as you would say, Tamika, where you are, and lead with purpose, as you would say, LaTonda, then your gifts will make room for you. You don't have to create the space for yourself all the time when things will work out, when you do exactly what you were assigned to do. And really master where you are and build that network and those relationships. Folks will call on you. You will be asked to come and create something. You'll be asked to do these things. So that's very powerful. Thank you for that. And I think that's a great segue to our next topic of discussion. As we think about all these wonderful women and, self-care and work-life balance. And so this first question is really going to go to Morgan and Katie. And this is an important question, right? It's a common question that came up several times from many of our audience members. So Morgan, what would you say to women who would like to hold a senior leadership position in the future, but also want to be, really good parents and spend quality time with their kids and their family, and is achieving both possible?
you know what? Anybody that says that they have it figured out is flat out lying. It's hard. It's a constant juggle. I'm not going to lie. But, you know, this question really speaks, you know, it's near and dear to my heart, as I know it is Katie's. We both have two children, two really young children. We've got a 5-year-old little boy and a 2.5-year-old little boy, and a wonderful husband. And it's a constant juggle, but it comes down to prioritizing, planning, and efficiency. And efficiency is something I work on constantly. Same with prioritizing and planning. But, you know, one thing that my team knows about me is that my first priority, and my bosses know about this as well, my kids and my husband and my family are my priority. First and foremost, when you talk about a life well lived and something that's near and dear and important to me personally, it's spending time with them. So, you know, one thing that I will say COVID reminded me is, you know, we got a lot of opportunity to work at home, and I was able to refocus on family and making sure that that's something now moving forward, that even though we don't sit and work from home, especially in this industry, you know, that I'm going to make sure that I prioritize that first and foremost over everything. Now, there are times when my family knows that I have to juggle. Mom's going to work late. I'm going to have to go to work early. This is going to be a week where you're not going to see me much. But, you know, I think it does take a village and a community, but it also takes an understanding team. And so to be able to show that vulnerability, that realness, what real life looks like in COVID, my team saw my children hanging from the rafters a lot and some of the chaos that is, you know, maybe not perfect behind the scenes at our house. And I think that is helpful for them, because it helps show them that, hey, that's okay. And that's part of life. You know, we spend, you know, 60 plus, sometimes more, sometimes 75, 80% of our lives with our coworkers. And so, you know, in a lot of ways, work and family really merge together. And so there has to be separation, but, you know, I actually appreciate the fact that they can see that vulnerability, and that I can see that vulnerability from them too. I think it just makes us a stronger team.
Thank you. Katie?
Morgan's right. She and I spend a lot of time talking about it. So I have a 5-year-old little boy as well, and a 1.5-year-old daughter. So it's chaos at my house at all times, similar to Morgan. I think everyone on my team has seen and or heard one or both of my children plus 2 dogs running around over the time in COVID. But with that being said, I would echo everything Morgan said. I think it is possible to do both, but Monique nailed it up front. It's not necessarily possible to do everything all the time. So for me, I think the key word I would use is deliberate. You know, it takes self-control. I think one of my personal weaknesses is I am tied to this thing all the time. And I've tried to really, really hard to block off periods of time and communicate with my team. And obviously there are times when this can't work, but block off periods of time where when I get home, until my kids go to bed, that is their time. And I try really, really hard to protect that and really make sure that those moments I do have with my family and the moments I do have with my children, I'm really intentional about being present and being with them and taking full advantage of those, because it is tough. There are going to be periods of time where I'm more busy and are able to not able to spend as much time as I'd like. But conversely, when I have the ability to spend more time, it's about being present and making sure I'm taking full advantage of it. The other thing I would build on what Morgan said is I think oftentimes, especially as a woman, there's sort of a feeling that you need to be leaning in and hiding the fact that you've got this family and you've got a priority. And I think, you know, everyone has different priorities. But I think one of the things that I actually felt really good about when I made the decision to join this family of businesses is I was candid in the interview process that my priority is going to be my family. Obviously, I will work day and night to make sure that I am doing everything I can for this organization as needed. But if there's a major point of conflict, I'm going to choose my family. And that is core to who I am as a person. And if that's something that worked for the organization, then that's an organization I want to work for. If it didn't, I wanted to know that up front. It would not have been a good fit in the long run. So, you know, for me, it was getting over that fear of sort of pretending that I don't have this rest of my life that I'm also dealing with, and owning it up front and making sure that when I found an opportunity that I was transparent about it. And I made sure that this was something where I can be successful in this organization.
Thank you for that. And so, Katie, we're going to go back to you again and ask you, this is another question that came from that was common from the audience, is understanding that a career in sports isn't necessarily a 9-to-5 job. You know, how do you continue to go on to create a healthy work-life balance. And then Monique will have you follow up from there.
Yeah, I think it really does just build on what I said in terms about being deliberate and everything that Morgan said about, focusing on efficiency. It's, it's not a 9 to 5. We have matches on weekends, we have matches on evenings. And again, I think one of the things that's great is you do often have the ability to say, okay, I know I'm going to be working a 10-hour day on Saturday. Oftentimes I try to bring my kids, right? They're not necessarily chasing me around all the time in the match, but this is something where mommy works really hard to put this thing together, to create this amazing match day experience. I want my kids to feel a part of it. I want them to know what's going on and have an understanding of when I'm not with them, what am I doing and why does it matter? And conversely, again, when I'm not working, it really is all about making sure that I'm being disciplined, taking that time for my family and not just defaulting into knocking out more emails when it's realistically, I probably could have done that at a different period of time and be spending this time with my family. So it really is making those intentional choices, but also recognizing that one of the great parts about working in sports is it is fun. There are a lot of exciting things that we get the privilege of being a part of and helping my family come along for the ride so they can feel a part of it too.
Awesome. And so Monique, we'll go to you, but the question that I'm actually going to ask you is, AMB Sports and Entertainment and Mercedes-Benz are both committed to taking care of their associates. And in your experience, should working for an organization that does this be a prerequisite for taking a job? And then Morgan will come to you after Monique.
Absolutely, it shouldn't. Katie just talked about it. She wanted to know in the interview, was it going to be a good fit for her? That's something that's incredibly important. I know I certainly took the same approach in the interview that I had with Mercedes-Benz. As much as they were interviewing me, I was certainly interviewing them. Are you going to fit what I want out of the next step in my career? And I think early on, I likely looked at two things as being really important when considering a job: my salary and my title. Today, that pie is broken up into so many pieces that I never saw in my early years. Am I able to balance my family well? Can I attend my kids' soccer games? Don't get me wrong, I will give my all to a company, just as the other panelists have said, but I also want to give my all to my family. I talked about not being able to do it all at the same time. It's because I need to compartmentalize. I have to be able to be mom when I'm mom and an employee when I'm an employee. So not only do I think about salary and job title, but I think about so many other things. Am I challenged? What is my mental health? Because we've all worked for the wrong person. So we all know what it feels like when you work for the right person. So being focused on that and just what quality of life am I creating? That's a really important one for me. And that doesn't get at all into just salary and job title. So when you think about how important it is for those that we work for to play an important part in our lives, they have to meet all of those things. We're lucky enough that AMBSC does a great job at that. I know Mercedes definitely does, but that's a really important part to me. Are you meeting the entire pie and all of the needs? Because if you're not, I'm going to feel pretty empty pretty soon. And that's going to reflect poorly for not only myself, but the employer as well. I'm not giving my all at that point. So that's a really important piece for me.
Morgan, do you have anything to add?
Quite simply, just in an example and coming from my previous, work, I wasn't looking to leave my previous job at Nike. And when I had the opportunity to work for Arthur Blank, I thought, man, there's been a stigma in working for sports teams that maybe they're not as people friendly within the organizations. Some are, some aren't. But when I had the chance to work for Arthur, I thought, man, I know he represents something different. And as you guys probably all know, I've got, the book Good Company behind me. Arthur's a little different in terms of the importance he places on associates. And what was pretty cool is when I did my interview, I was seeking that out. I was hoping to feel that when I walked into the buildings. And, not only was it represented, on the walls, the associates were highlighted on the walls of the family office and the walls of the stadium and the walls, in Flowery Branch. But I felt it. It was really something that I felt was different in this organization, which is one of the big decisions and why I chose to be here. So I would absolutely say that's a prerequisite.
Thank you so much for that. And that's an amazing transition for our next topic of discussion, and that's diversity, equity, inclusion in sports. And for the first question, I want to go to Jill and Latanda. And Latanda, first question is going to be for you. What are the most important qualities a company can have and action items they should take to promote an inclusive culture for women along with advancement opportunities?
Jacoria, that one's simple. Ask women. Ask women what they want. Ask women what they need. And they have to understand the diversity within this group, right? So if you think about intersectionality, if you think about life phases, what I needed when I was straight from college going into consulting is very different than what I need and expect from my career, as Monique said, as the mother of two preteens. I have an 11-year-old daughter who's amazing and a 14-year-old son who's absolutely fantastic. My life is different now. My career is very different now. My experiences as a Black woman in any organization can be very different than what other people experience. So I would really caution organizations to look at a women's initiative and think about that as one homogenous group, because it really isn't. The other thing that I would say is that I would stress to women leaders, I know it's important for you to sit in your seat, whatever seat that is, but we cannot make the mistake of thinking that we speak for all women, because our experiences are not the same. I cannot speak for some of the younger women on my team. Their aspirations might be very different. They might be in a different life phase. Folks who don't have kids may be caregivers for older adults, aging parents. So it's really, really important that we ask, we understand the diversity, and then we cater to those specific needs. Organizations are really great at segmenting when it comes to their products. Not always so great at segmenting when it comes to how they serve their own associates, their own employees. That same segmentation has to happen when you're talking about gender and intersectionality.
Thank you so much. And Jill, we're going to go to you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, to me, it goes back to the golden rule is first and foremost, treat everyone with the same level of respect and offer equal opportunities. And, I think we have to be really intentional about recruiting more women up front, whether it's on college campuses, making sure that they're part of the internship program. I mean, the golf industry is very male dominant. And, I think as an industry, we need to bring more women into the business early on. This is going to help develop future women leaders. And like I said before, have different points of view and a different approach to the business, which I always think is healthy.
Awesome. And so, Jill, we're going to stay with you, right? And the question that I have is, have you ever had a situation where your idea or opinion was overshadowed or not considered by a male leader in your career? And if so, how did you handle that?
Honestly, I can't think of a specific time when my opinion was overshadowed. There are times that I think men can be more dominant in a situation. And I think I may have alluded to this earlier, but it's really important not to shy away from this. Make sure you find the right moment to introduce your idea and to be heard. Sometimes the opportunity might not be there, but you got to figure out a way to make your point and get it in there.
And Tamika, I want to ask you the same question. Do you have anything to add about a situation where your idea or opinion was overshadowed or not considered by a male in your career, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I would say if you were going to work in the team sports side of the business, the male-dominated team sports side, you're going to face it, and it'll be a regular thing with some organization. I think it depends on the culture of that organization. I've had things as recent in the last 2 weeks that was working on with some male leaders from outside the organization, and I was assumed to be an administrative support person in the huddle. So I think it is a regular thing that we as women have to face. But to echo what Jill said, you've got to, when you see a seat at a table, you have to be willing to take it. A lot of times I see women come into the conference room, there'll be too many people for the meeting, no one is actually even in the room yet, and they'll sit at this chair's not at the table. Literally remove themselves from having a voice. And I think that is a bigger challenge than the men who don't recognize you as their equal, because those are going to exist in society. We can't do anything about that. We've dealt with that our whole lives, whether that was on the playground. And a lot of my approach to life in my interactions is that playground environment. I was the girl that made the guys let me play football in middle school at recess. Didn't matter what I had on, I was on that. They couldn't tell me no, I wasn't going to get a play. I invited myself to the guy who I rode the bus with. We grew up together, and he had his birthday, and he only wanted guys there, and I was there, like uninvited, just showed up. So I think some of that you might not want to be as aggressive, but when you show up and take a seat, you're usually accepted. And I think a lot of times our fear is we see those people, we have those narratives we've heard in our head before, and we allow that to let us not keep trying. If there's a seat, you'll eventually be recognized at the table.
Thank you for that. And Tamika, it's great to know that you've been crashing playgrounds, parties, and now boardrooms since you were young. And I think the last question we'll go to is back to you again, Tamika, and then LaTonda for the follow-up. There has been a lot of discussion lately about equality between men's and women's sports, especially in the news. What do you think is the biggest barrier in visibility and, quite frankly, equality between the two?
Yeah, so a lot of times we use revenue as an excuse for how things get attention or do not get attention. And we can say maybe there's some justification to some of that at times. With more revenue, there's more money to do other things. However, we've seen instances where our U.S. women's soccer team selling out venues and still being treated as an unequal. They've won cups. They are celebrities around the world where they go and still facing those challenges. And I think what we saw happen in the basketball tournament was totally unacceptable. If things that are access oriented, weight rooms, those, we have to have equity in that. We cannot ever catch up if we are constantly given less tools. And so I think it's something we'll constantly battle. TV ratings are a big part of that, used as justification. But again, as we look at that U.S. women's soccer team, the TV ratings were there, the money is there, and the quality still isn't. So I think even when we take away the excuses of the ratings and the revenue, there's still an opportunity for progress. I think what is happening at Augusta National that Jill talked about is an amazing story. You're giving women an opportunity to play at a place that women, were openly not invited. And I just love that story and what Mercedes has done around that to spotlight the women and bring in women from successful women from sports and industry around the country to be part of that. And I just really, really appreciate all those that are leaning into this lens of diversity, whether that's racial, gender, any of those lenses, because I always tell my team, Jacoria, you can pick whichever basketball player you want to be the greatest of all time. And I will always go with Michael Jordan. And if you give me 5 Michael Jordans and you get to pick 5 All-Stars to compete against me, you're going to win every time. Because diversity makes us better. Diversity offsets strengths and weaknesses. Diversity is necessary. And I think until we realize the value that diversity brings, we're going to continue to suffer the productivity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I want to go to LaTonda. And before I do, I got to, toot her horn just a little bit because she won't do it to you all. But, LaTonda serves on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council for the Blank family of businesses as well. And she's been doing some incredible work in helping us lead that initiative and effort across the businesses. And so LaTonda, building on what Tamika talked about in diversity and the importance of how we are stronger together and our differences make us better, I would love to hear your take on the last question.
So the interesting thing, Jacoria, is that, and thank you for the shout out. The interesting thing is that equality for women and all the things that Tamika mentioned are absolutely spot on. The thing that I think folks can do is use their influence and platform to help elevate in any way that they can. And I will use a really fantastic example that impresses me all the time. Our organization has been behind, has led, has shepherded girls' high school flag football and really been instrumental in having that sanctioned as a sport for the state of Georgia. So shout out to our CR team, Amanda Dinkle, Rich, and all of our leadership that's been instrumental, and Chris Millman in that work That's really important because you have to start somewhere. And then I'm also proud that we're going to be the first host here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the girls flag football at the collegiate level. We're using our platforms, we're using our influence, we're making those investments. So wherever you are, whatever you do, look at how you can support and make it so that more women have more access. But because what we know is women and girls can do absolutely anything. And if you give them the support and investment and help with your influence, all you have to do is get out of the way.
Wow, so powerful. What a way to wrap up Women's History Month. I don't know about you all, but after today, I'm even more inspired to push forward in this industry and create pathways for other women who look like me. First, we have to give a big thank you and a shout out to all of our panelists for participating in today's conversation. So round of applause for you all, and a very, very special thank you to Monique and Mercedes-Benz USA for sponsoring this panel. This has absolutely been an amazing discussion, and I hope each of you have learned as much as I have today, and we all have. This panel is just the peak of what is to come. And as I said previously, all of us and all of you watching will continue to make history every single day. But before we let you go, we want to hear from you. Everyone tuned in today will receive an email in a matter of moments that will include a very short survey that will take less than 2 minutes to complete. Let us know what you thought of today's conversation, as your feedback will help us better develop new and exciting ways to connect with women moving forward. Be safe, stay well, and make sure you celebrate the women in your life, not just during Women's History Month, but every day, because girls truly do run the world. I am Jacoria Borders, and on behalf of the Blank family of businesses, we thank you for joining us today, and the best is yet to come.
Victoria, you are awesome. You were so natural. Someone needs to take